The wedding hall fell silent the moment I placed the ring back into its velvet box. Hundreds of eyes locked onto me. The orchestra stopped mid-note. The master of ceremonies forced a smile that trembled at the corners. "Mr. Carter, perhaps this is part of the program?" "No." One word. Calm. Steady. Heavy enough to crush every expectation inside the room. Across from me, Amelia's smile froze. "What are you doing?" she whispered through clenched teeth, keeping the elegant expression she'd practiced for months. "Everyone's watching." "I know. You promised." "I did. So put the ring on." I looked at the woman I'd loved for 6 years. The woman I'd built a future around. The woman who had spent the last 3 years turning the date of our anniversary into something I never questioned. Until yesterday, my fingers tightened around the little black box. "I won't marry you." Gasps spread through the hall like a wave. Her mother stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped across the marble floor. "What nonsense is this?" My own aunt covered her mouth. Guests whispered. Phones quietly appeared beneath tables. Amelia finally dropped her perfect smile. "You've lost your mind." "No." I met her eyes without anger. "I finally found it." Yesterday had begun with flowers. She had asked me to drive her to the outskirts of the city. "It's important," she'd said. "I want you beside me." Of course I agreed. I always agreed. She carried white lilies. I carried the umbrella because rain threatened overhead. Neither of us spoke as we climbed the stone steps leading toward a quiet cemetery. I assumed we were visiting a relative, someone she'd mentioned once. Instead, she stopped before a polished black gravestone. Her hand trembled as she brushed away a fallen leaf. The engraving stole the air from my lungs. Ethan Brooks. Beloved son. Beloved fiancé. Gone too soon. Below the name was a date. My chest tightened. The same date Amelia insisted we celebrate every single year. The day she'd called our beginning. The anniversary she'd cried over whenever I forgot. The anniversary I'd planned vacations around. The anniversary I'd proposed on. It wasn't ours. It had never belonged to us. She placed the lilies down carefully. "I still came," she whispered to the stone. I kept my promise. My heartbeat became strangely quiet. "I brought someone." She looked back at me. There wasn't guilt in her eyes. Only sadness. "Asher." She smiled weakly. "I wanted him to know about you." I stared at her. "You wanted me?" "He's a good man." She nodded toward the grave. "I think you'd approve." The rain began. Tiny drops struck the marble. I couldn't hear them. All I heard was one sentence echoing inside my skull. "Beloved fiancé." Not boyfriend. Fiancé. The man buried beneath my feet had once stood exactly where I stood now. The future I'd believed was mine had belonged to someone else first. I forced myself to ask, "Why is today's date important?" She blinked, then answered without hesitation. "It's the day we got engaged." Silence. Seconds later, realization struck her. She looked at me. Her lips parted. She understood what she'd just admitted. "Our anniversary." I asked quietly. Her face turned pale. "Asher, our anniversary isn't ours." She couldn't answer. She simply cried. Not because she'd lied. Because she'd finally been caught. That night, I returned to the apartment alone. I didn't shout. I didn't smash anything. I folded my shirts, placed my books into boxes, wrapped my late father's watch carefully in a towel. Every object felt strangely light, as though it had stopped belonging there long before I noticed. My phone vibrated continuously. "Amelia, 23 missed calls, 37 messages. Please explain. It's not what you think. Come home. Please." I read none of them. Instead, I opened the wardrobe. At the very back, hidden beneath winter blankets, sat a dusty cardboard box. Not mine. Curiosity one. Inside were photographs, letters, movie tickets, a silver lighter engraved with 2 initials. EB. A wedding invitation. Not ours. Theirs. Printed years ago. Cancelled by death. My hand stopped moving. There it was. The suit Ethan had planned to wear. The venue. The menu. Even the honeymoon itinerary. Every dream carefully preserved. Not forgotten. Stored. Protected. Like sacred relics. Under our bed. The apartment we'd called our first home had never truly belonged to 2 people. Someone else had always lived there. Invisible. Untouchable. Worshipped. I closed the box. Left it exactly where I found it. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Because the decision had already been made. Not in anger. Not in revenge. Just finished. Back in the wedding hall, Amelia stepped toward me. Her voice shook. We can talk after this. There isn't anything left to discuss. You owe me that. I owed you honesty. My words remained calm. You owed me the same. Guests looked between us, confused. Her father walked onto the stage. What exactly are you accusing my daughter of? I faced him respectfully. I'm accusing no one. Then stop embarrassing this family. I have no intention of embarrassing anyone. I looked toward Amelia again. I'm simply refusing a marriage built on a lie. The room erupted. Voices crashed into one another until they became meaningless noise. Someone shouted that I was heartless. Someone else demanded an explanation. The photographer quietly lowered his camera. The wedding planner buried her face in her hands. Only Amelia remained frozen, staring at the unopened ring box in my hand. You can't leave, she whispered. I can't. You promised forever. I promised forever with someone who chose me. A tear rolled down her cheek. I did choose you. I shook my head. No. The answer hurt both of us. You chose someone you lost. She flinched. And when he disappeared from your life, you found someone willing to carry the weight he left behind. That's not true. Then tell everyone. She swallowed. Tell them why the anniversary mattered. The color drained from her face. Her silence became louder than any confession. People began looking at one another. Her mother stepped forward immediately. Amelia doesn't owe anyone an explanation. No, I agreed softly. She doesn't. I placed the ring box on the ceremony table. But neither do I owe anyone this marriage. I stepped down from the stage. No dramatic exit. No shouting. No accusations. Just footsteps. Measured. Controlled. Behind me, Amelia suddenly called my name. Asher. I stopped. For a moment, I almost turned around. Almost. Instead, I waited. If I tell you everything, she asked through tears, will you stay? I closed my eyes. That question should have come yesterday. Or last year. Or 3 years ago. Not after every guest had witnessed the truth breaking through the polished surface of our perfect relationship. When honesty arrives only after exposure, I said quietly, it's no longer honesty. It's damage control. The sentence struck harder than anger ever could. No one spoke. I walked toward the entrance. The heavy doors opened. Rain hammered the stone steps outside. I welcomed it. Behind me, I heard hurried footsteps. Not Amelia's. A voice called out, Mr. Carter. I turned. An elderly man in a charcoal gray suit stood beneath the doorway, holding a worn leather folder against his chest. His breathing was uneven, as if he'd rushed across the city. I've been trying to find you. I don't believe we've met. We haven't. He looked toward the wedding hall, then back at me. Thank goodness I wasn't too late. His words carried strange urgency. I'm Daniel Reeves. He extended a business card. No company logo, only a name. And beneath it, legal executor. I represent someone's final wishes. My heartbeat slowed. I'm sorry. I know today isn't ideal. His expression darkened. But what I have concerns your fiancé. My former fiancé. He nodded once. I suspected as much. He hesitated, then asked a question that sent a chill down my spine. Has anyone mentioned Ethan Brooks recently? The rain seemed to disappear. Every sound faded. Why? Daniel glanced over my shoulder toward the brightly lit hall. Because the truth surrounding Ethan's death, he stopped himself, was never the whole truth. Before I could respond, the wedding hall doors burst open again. Guests spilled outside, arguing among themselves. Amelia pushed through the crowd. Her makeup was ruined by tears. Asher, she saw Daniel. Her entire body stiffened. Recognition flashed across her face. No, she whispered. No, you weren't supposed to come today. Daniel looked at her with quiet pity. I waited long enough. She shook her head violently. You promised. I promised after the ceremony. I changed my mind. It's too late. Fear replaced grief in her eyes. Real fear. The kind that comes when a secret refuses to stay buried. Daniel slowly opened the leather folder. Inside lay a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in bold black handwriting, were 6 simple words. To be opened after Amelia marries. The handwriting wasn't Amelia's, nor Daniel's. I recognized it instantly. It matched every letter I'd found inside the memory box. Every note, every signature, every photograph. Ethan Brooks. The dead man's handwriting. Daniel held the envelope between us. This belongs to both of you. A gust of wind swept across the entrance. The envelope slipped from his fingers. I caught it before it touched the rain-soaked ground. Amelia's voice broke into a desperate cry. Don't open it. I looked from the trembling envelope to the woman who had begged me to stay, and realized that whatever truth waited inside had frightened her far more than losing me. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Rain drummed against the stone steps while the wedding guests stood frozen beneath the entrance canopy. No one cared about the ruined ceremony anymore. Every eye was fixed on the envelope in my hand. Amelia took a cautious step forward. Asher, please. Her voice was barely audible. Don't read it here. Daniel Reeves adjusted his glasses and spoke quietly. Mr. Carter, the decision is yours. I looked between them. One begged. The other waited. Neither reached for the envelope. Why was it addressed to both of us? I asked. Daniel answered without hesitation. Because Ethan believed the truth belonged to whoever stood beside Amelia after him. Amelia's face turned white. Stop. Daniel ignored her. He instructed me never to interfere unless this exact condition was met. She shook her head. He wasn't thinking clearly. No. Daniel's expression remained calm. He was thinking more clearly than anyone around him. The silence that followed seemed to suffocate the crowd. Someone whispered, Who is Ethan? Another guest answered, Her late fiancé. The whispers spread rapidly. Late fiancé. Former fiancé. Secret fiancé. The words bounced around the entrance like accusations. I finally broke the wax seal. Amelia reached for my wrist. Please. I gently stepped back. No more secrets. The letter unfolded with a soft crackle. The handwriting matched every page I'd found inside the hidden box. Elegant. Steady. Almost peaceful. I began reading. If this letter has been opened, then Amelia finally chose to marry again. First, congratulations. If you're reading this, then you're probably the man who loved her after I could no longer stay. Thank you. I frowned. There was no bitterness. No resentment. Only gratitude. I continued. You deserve something I never received. The complete truth. My pulse quickened. Everyone believes I died in an accident. I didn't. A collective gasp rose behind me. Amelia closed her eyes. Daniel lowered his head. I chose to disappear. The words struck like thunder. I looked up instinctively. No one moved. Even the rain seemed quieter. I continued. By the time you read this, I hope the people responsible have already paid for what they did. If they haven't, this letter may finally begin that process. The page trembled slightly between my fingers. Not because of the wind, because my hands had begun to shake. I looked toward Amelia. You knew? Tears streamed down her face. You knew he wasn't dead? She couldn't answer. That silence answered for her. Her mother suddenly stepped between us. Enough. She grabbed Amelia's shoulders. This wedding is over. Everyone should leave. Daniel spoke firmly. Mrs. Bennett. She turned sharply. You've remained silent for 15 years. It ends today. For the first time since arriving, anger appeared in his voice. You don't get to decide when the truth is inconvenient. Her father stepped forward. You have no right to accuse this family. Daniel slowly removed another document from the folder. I have every right. He handed me several photocopies. Medical reports. Police statements. Insurance records. The first page immediately caught my attention. Death certificate application, withdrawn. Withdrawn? My eyes widened. There had never been a finalized death certificate. Only a declaration of presumed death years later. Someone had pushed the legal process forward despite missing evidence. I turned another page. A bank transfer. Insurance compensation. Millions. Paid shortly after Ethan vanished. The recipient wasn't Amelia. It was her parents. So that's why. The words escaped before I realized it. Amelia stared at the papers with horror. No. She whispered. No. You never saw these? Daniel asked. She slowly shook her head. I thought. You thought he died. Daniel nodded sadly. Because someone wanted you to. Her knees nearly gave way. I instinctively reached out. Then stopped. Not because I hated her. Because this wasn't my place anymore. Someone else caught her. Her younger brother, Liam. He had arrived late, still wearing an untied necktie. What happened? He looked around in confusion. Why is everyone crying? No one answered. He noticed the documents. Then his parents. Then Amelia. What aren't you telling me? His mother looked away. That single movement said everything. An hour later, the guests had mostly dispersed. The wedding hall stood nearly empty. The flowers remained. The untouched cake waited in silence. Only a handful of people stayed behind. Daniel, Liam, Amelia, her parents, and me. Daniel placed another sealed envelope onto the table. There are 6. Everyone stared. 1 for each stage. What stages? Liam asked. Daniel answered quietly. Ethan planned for the truth to emerge slowly. Why? So no one could destroy all the evidence at once. Her father slammed his hand onto the table. This is ridiculous. Daniel looked directly at him. Is it? The older man's confidence faltered. Only for a second. But I noticed. So did Liam. The wedding hall no longer resembled a place meant for celebration. Half-melted candles stood beside untouched champagne glasses. White roses had begun to droop under the damp air drifting in through the open doors. The decorations suddenly looked like decorations for a funeral. Daniel carefully arranged the documents across one of the banquet tables. This letter explains why Ethan disappeared, he said. The remaining 5 explain who benefited. No one spoke. Liam looked at his parents. Tell me he's lying. His father folded his arms. I don't need to defend myself against fantasies written by a dead man. Daniel corrected him. A missing man. The distinction landed heavily. I remained standing near the window, watching rain slide down the glass. For the first time that day, I felt strangely detached. This wasn't my battle. It had never been. For years, I believed my greatest pain was loving someone who couldn't fully love me back. Now I realized Amelia had been living inside a lie larger than either of us. That didn't erase what she'd done, but it changed what had shaped her. Asher. She approached slowly. Her wedding dress dragged softly across the polished floor. I know you don't owe me anything. I remained silent. But I need you to hear one thing. I nodded once. When Ethan disappeared, she began. My parents told me they had identified his body. Her voice cracked. They said it was too damaged for me to see. She looked down at her trembling hands. They arranged everything. The funeral, the memorial, the anniversary. I believed I was honoring him. She inhaled shakily. I never imagined they were hiding something. I asked the question that mattered most. Then why hide the box? Her eyes filled again. Because I couldn't let go. There was no excuse. No attempt to justify it. Just painful honesty. I thought loving you and remembering him could exist together. She gave a bitter smile. I was wrong. I studied her for several seconds. Then answered quietly. Yes. One word. Nothing more. She closed her eyes as if accepting a sentence already passed. Across the room, Liam suddenly spoke. I'm opening the second envelope. His mother rushed forward. No. He pulled back instinctively. Why not? Because this family has suffered enough. He laughed bitterly. No. He looked around the ruined wedding hall. We've suffered because nobody was allowed to ask questions. Daniel handed him the envelope without hesitation. Liam broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten journal page. He read aloud. If you're reading this, then someone finally refused to keep pretending. Good. Pretending is what trapped all of us. His voice slowed. My accident wasn't random. I discovered financial records connected to Bennett Construction. Money disappeared through companies that didn't exist. Liam frowned. Our company? Daniel nodded once. It was the family company. Liam continued. I confronted Richard Bennett privately. 2 days later, I disappeared. Silence. Every gaze shifted toward Amelia's father. Richard Bennett remained motionless. His expression was controlled. Too controlled. Finally, he smiled. A cold, measured smile. Convenient. He adjusted his cufflinks. A handwritten accusation from someone who vanished 15 years ago. He looked directly at me. Mr. Carter, you work in corporate compliance. I nodded cautiously. You know anonymous allegations prove nothing. They don't, I agreed. They point investigators toward evidence. For the first time, Richard's smile weakened. Only slightly, but enough. Daniel reached into the folder once more. I was hoping you would say that. He placed a flash drive on the table. Ethan anticipated that argument. Richard's face lost all color. Daniel's voice remained steady. He left copies. Not one. Not two. Many. In different places. Richard whispered before he could stop himself. That's impossible. Daniel met his eyes. No. He said calmly. That's why he survived long enough to prepare. The room fell into absolute silence. Richard had just admitted something no innocent man should have known. His wife turned toward him slowly. Richard. Her voice trembled. What did you mean by survived? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time that day, The lie he had built over 15 years had begun to collapse, not because anyone attacked him, but because he could no longer keep his own words under control. Richard Bennett realized his mistake the same moment everyone else did. His lips pressed into a thin line. For years, he had been a man who never stumbled over words, never lost control of a room. Board meetings, investor conferences, family gatherings. He always knew exactly what to say. But one careless sentence had cracked the foundation beneath him. "What do you mean, survived?" His wife, Eleanor, stared at him as though she had never truly known the man she'd married. Richard didn't answer. Instead, he straightened his suit jacket. "I misspoke." Daniel Reeves let out a quiet sigh. "No." He slid another document across the table. "You remembered." Richard ignored it. "I'm leaving." He turned toward the exit. Anyone who wishes to continue believing fairy tales may do so. He had taken only 3 steps when Liam spoke. "Stop." Richard didn't. Liam raised his voice. "I said stop." For the first time in years, a son spoke to his father without hesitation. Richard slowly turned around. "What?" Liam's hands were trembling. "When Ethan disappeared." He swallowed. "Did you know he was still alive?" Silence. Richard looked at his son, then at Amelia, then finally at Eleanor. His expression remained unreadable. "You've all become emotional. I asked a simple question, and I'm choosing not to answer." Liam laughed bitterly. "There." He looked around the room. "That's the answer." An hour later, police officers hadn't arrived. No accusations had been filed. No dramatic arrests had happened. Instead, everyone sat in separate corners of the empty reception hall, like strangers waiting for different trains. I watched the rain ease outside. My suitcase still rested inside my car. I could leave. Nothing tied me here anymore. Yet something kept me seated. Not revenge. Not curiosity alone. Closure. Daniel approached with 2 cups of coffee. "You haven't left." "I almost did." He handed me one. "But I spent 6 years believing I understood my own life." I looked at the dark coffee. Turns out I understood almost none of it. Daniel nodded. "Ethan once said something similar." "You knew him well." "We worked together." "What was he like?" Daniel smiled faintly. "The type of man who apologized to waiters for making them walk to his table." I couldn't help smiling. "He sounds kind." Daniel finished my sentence. "He was." The smile faded. And that's exactly why dangerous people underestimated him. Across the hall, Amelia sat alone beside the abandoned wedding arch, still wearing her dress, still holding the bouquet she no longer seemed aware of. Nobody approached her, not even her mother. Liam finally walked over. "I need the truth." She nodded weakly. "I'll tell you everything." He sat beside her. "I always believed Ethan died." "So did I." "No." She looked down. "I believed what Mom and Dad wanted me to believe." She took a shaky breath. "The funeral was closed. The coffin stayed sealed. They told me I couldn't bear to see him." Liam's face tightened. "You never questioned it?" "I did. Every day." She looked toward the ceiling. "They always had an answer. The police. The hospital. The investigation. I was grieving. I wanted to believe someone knew what was happening." She laughed softly. "But grief makes obedient people." Liam reached for her hand. For the first time that day, she cried like a little sister instead of a bride. Daniel opened another folder. "I think it's time." He placed photographs across the table. Construction sites. Storage warehouses. Accounting ledgers. One image caught my attention. Ethan. Alive. The picture was grainy, taken from a distance. A beard covered part of his face. His hair was longer, but it was unmistakably him. The timestamp read, 3 years after his disappearance. My pulse quickened. He really survived. Daniel nodded. He stayed hidden. Why? Because he believed someone would finish what they started if he returned. So he ran? No. Daniel's expression hardened. He gathered evidence. Every photograph told another story. Meetings. Documents exchanged. Unknown faces. Dates. Locations. He hadn't disappeared to escape. He had disappeared to expose something. The realization settled heavily inside me. The man I'd unknowingly competed against for years had never been my rival. He had been fighting an entirely different battle. Late afternoon sunlight finally broke through the clouds, casting pale gold across the nearly empty wedding hall. The storm had ended. The silence hadn't. Daniel connected the flash drive to a laptop left behind by the wedding coordinator. The screen flickered. Folders appeared, each one labeled with a year. 15 years of evidence. Liam leaned forward. How? Daniel answered quietly. Ethan backed everything up. Inside were scanned contracts, emails, bank transfers, voice recordings. The amount of material was overwhelming. One audio file stood out. Meeting_04_final.wave. Daniel clicked it. Static crackled. Then voices emerged. The first belonged to Ethan. Calm. Controlled. These invoices don't exist. A second voice answered. Richard, you're looking too deeply. I work for the company. Exactly. Silence. Then Ethan again. I'm reporting this. Richard laughed. No. Another pause. Then, you'll think differently after you marry Amelia. The recording ended. Liam stared at the speakers. You bribed him. Richard remained expressionless. Daniel opened another file. This time, the voices weren't calm. They were shouting. Ethan. Richard. Another unidentified man. Then tires screeching. Metal crashing. The recording abruptly stopped. Nobody breathed. Eleanor slowly covered her mouth. My God. Richard suddenly stood. Enough. His voice echoed through the hall. This circus ends now. He reached for the laptop. Before he could touch it, Liam stepped between them. No. Move. No. For several long seconds, father and son faced each other without speaking. Richard finally lowered his hand, then smiled. A strange smile. You think you've won? He looked at Daniel. Those files prove accounting irregularities. He shrugged. Nothing more. Daniel calmly opened another folder. Witness statements. Richard's smile disappeared. There were witnesses? I asked. Daniel nodded. They were afraid. Until recently. He selected the first statement. A former truck driver appeared on screen in a recorded deposition. I saw Mr. Brooks alive after the crash. The man swallowed. They told us never to mention it. They? The company executives. Did you recognize them? Yes. He listed 3 names. 2 were former executives. 1 was Richard Bennett. The room became impossibly still. Eleanor stepped backward. You lied to all of us. Richard looked at her without emotion. I protected this family. No. Her voice rose for the first time. You protected yourself. She removed her wedding ring. Slowly, deliberately, placed it on the banquet table. The soft metallic sound echoed through the hall. I won't spend another day defending a man I don't recognize. Richard watched the ring. For the first time, genuine emotion crossed his face. Not regret. Loss of control. He turned toward Amelia. Say something. She looked at him with red, exhausted eyes. I spent 15 years mourning a man who wasn't dead. She paused. And 6 years letting another good man carry grief that wasn't his. She glanced toward me. Our eyes met briefly. No hope. No request. Only apology. Then she looked back at her father. I have nothing left to say to you. Richard stood alone in the center of the ruined wedding hall. No shouting. No one attacking him. One by one, the people who had believed him simply stepped away. And in that widening circle of silence, he finally understood the one thing power could never force back into place. Trust. Richard Bennett was arrested 3 days later. Not in dramatic fashion. Not with flashing cameras or shouting reporters. 2 investigators arrived at the Bennett Group headquarters at 9 in the morning, walked into the executive office on the top floor, and escorted him out through the front entrance. Employees watched through glass walls. No one spoke. People who had once rushed to greet him suddenly found great interest in their phones, their desks, their coffee cups. Power disappeared quietly. That was something I learned over the following weeks. People imagine downfall as an explosion. In reality, it is erosion. One truth, then another, until there is nothing left standing. I returned to work. My office on the 23rd floor overlooked half the city. For years, I had spent extra hours there, answering calls during weekends, postponing vacations, making myself useful to everyone. Now, for the first time in a long while, I left at 6 in the evening. The world didn't collapse. The company survived. Life continued. Funny how much we sacrifice for things that never asked for sacrifice. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Mr. Carter? It was Mia Chun, a junior analyst from compliance. She placed a folder on my desk. The Bennett investigation files. I glanced at the papers. There was enough evidence to bury several executives. Fraud. False accounts. Shell companies. Insurance manipulation. Richard hadn't merely hidden Ethan's disappearance. He had built an entire empire on lies. Mia hesitated. Can I ask something? I nodded. Were you angry? About what? She looked uncomfortable. Your wedding. I considered the question. Outside, evening sunlight reflected off distant buildings. I was. And now? I thought for a moment. Now I'm tired. She seemed surprised. Not relieved. No. I smiled faintly. Relief comes later. She nodded slowly. Then left. That evening, Daniel called. They found him. The cup in my hand stopped halfway to my lips. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Alive? Yes. The answer felt unreal. 15 years. An entire life. And yet, alive. Where? A small coastal town. Daniel paused. He knew this day would come. Why didn't he return? Fear. The answer came quickly. And responsibility. I remained silent. Daniel continued. He believed exposing the truth mattered more than reclaiming his old life. I looked out at the city lights. Thousands of people moving through thousands of stories. Some returning. Some leaving. Some waiting too long. Will Amelia meet him? That's her decision. And yours? Daniel asked. What will you do? I thought about it. The hidden box beneath the bed. The cemetery. The wedding hall. The envelope. The years I spent competing with a memory. Then I answered. Nothing. Daniel was quiet. Nothing. This isn't my ending. I smiled softly. It's theirs. A week later, the news broke publicly. Bennett Construction fraud investigation expands. Executives resigned. Share prices collapsed. Former employees came forward. Lawsuits followed. Every day brought another revelation. Richard remained silent. But silence could no longer save him. Consequences had finally arrived. Not because someone destroyed him. Because he spent years building something rotten. And rotten things collapse. One afternoon, Amelia visited my office. No wedding dress. No tears. Just a simple gray coat and tired eyes. She stood near the doorway. I won't stay long. I gestured toward the chair. She sat carefully. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she placed a small box on the desk. The ring. I looked at it. Unopened. I thought you should have it. You can sell it. A small smile crossed her face. Practical. I'm learning. The smile faded. I met him. I understood immediately. Ethan. How was it? She looked toward the window. Strange. Painful. Peaceful. She folded her hands together. He apologized. I frowned slightly. For what? For leaving. Her voice grew quieter. And for becoming a ghost in everyone's lives. I looked at the city outside. Ghosts. Memories. Regrets. Sometimes they stay because people hold them. Sometimes because people fear letting go. Amelia took a slow breath. I owe you an apology. You already gave one. Not enough. She looked directly at me. I loved you. The words carried no expectation. Only truth. But not in the way you deserved. I nodded. Because denying it would help no one. She stood. Then paused. You know what the worst part is? What? I kept thinking time would fix things. She smiled sadly. But time only reveals what people refuse to face. Then she left. And for the first time, watching her walk away didn't hurt. Autumn arrived quietly. The city changed color. Trees along the river turned gold and red. Cold air replaced the heavy heat of summer. Life moved forward. As it always does. The investigation continued for months. Each week uncovered another hidden account, another false contract, another witness. Richard Bennett eventually confessed to financial crimes. He never admitted everything. Men like him rarely do. But truth no longer required his permission. It existed with or without his words. One evening, Daniel invited me to dinner. A small restaurant near the harbor. Simple food. Quiet atmosphere. No reporters. No legal files. Just two men talking. Daniel poured tea into my cup. Ethan wanted to meet you. I looked up. He did. Daniel nodded. He said there was one person he owed thanks to. I laughed softly. For what? For giving Amelia years of kindness when he couldn't. I stared at the steam rising from the tea. Strange. The man I had unknowingly compared myself against had never seen me as competition, only as someone who carried part of a burden. Life was complicated that way. Daniel reached into his coat pocket. Another letter. I almost laughed. How many letters did he leave? Too many. Daniel smiled. He liked planning ahead. I opened it. The handwriting was familiar now. Asher, if you're reading this, then the truth finally reached daylight. Good. Truth should not live underground. Daniel told me about you. He said you were calm, patient, reliable. I was glad. Because Amelia needed someone kind. Maybe she failed you. Maybe she failed herself too. People often do. I spent years blaming others. Then I realized grief is also a choice. Not the pain itself, but what we build around it. If you walked away, I hope you walk towards something better. Don't become a man who measures his life by what he lost. Measure it by what you still have the courage to build. Ethan. I folded the letter carefully. Outside the restaurant window, ships moved slowly across dark water. For a long time, neither Daniel nor I spoke. Some words needed silence around them. Weeks later, I visited the cemetery. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The old gravestone remained. Flowers rested nearby, but something had changed. A new plaque stood beside it. In memory of lost years, not lost lives. Simple words. Honest words. I stood there quietly. Wind moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, leaves rustled softly. And for the first time, I realized something important. I had spent years believing my story was about betrayal. It wasn't. It was about seeing clearly. About understanding when to stay and when to leave. A familiar voice spoke behind me. Asher. I turned. Ethan stood several steps away. Older than the photographs. Thinner. Gray beginning to touch his hair. But alive. Entirely alive. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Then he smiled. Thank you. I smiled back. For what? He looked toward the gravestone. For proving something. What? That good people still exist. The wind moved between us, carrying away old things. Old anger. Old comparisons. Old ghosts. Ethan looked toward the city in the distance. I think we're both late, starting new lives. Maybe. I looked at the sky. Or maybe we're exactly on time. Neither of us spoke after that. We simply stood there. Two men connected by years neither had chosen. Watching autumn leaves fall quietly onto stone. And understanding that some endings are not defeats. They are doors. Winter arrived with clear skies and cold mornings. 3 months had passed since the wedding that never happened. People still recognized me from the news. Some approached with sympathy. Others with curiosity. I learned to tell the difference within seconds. Sympathy looked into your eyes. Curiosity searched for gossip. I politely declined both whenever I could. Life, for the first time in years, belonged to me instead of everyone else's expectations. Monday morning began with an unexpected email. Subject: Internal Ethics Committee. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another request for documents related to the Bennett investigation. Instead, it contained a promotion. Director of Corporate Integrity. A newly created department. The CEO himself wanted me to lead it. Not because I had uncovered Richard Bennett. I hadn't. Daniel and Ethan had done the impossible work. My role had simply been refusing to participate in another lie. Sometimes integrity isn't exposing corruption. It's refusing to help hide it. You haven't answered. Mia-chan stood outside my office, coffee in hand. I looked up from the email. I just received it. Her eyes widened. You got it? I think so. She laughed. I've never seen someone look disappointed after a promotion. I'm thinking. About what? The last promotion I accepted. She tilted her head. It cost me weekends. The one before that cost holidays. The one before that. My relationship? Mia smiled knowingly. So what's different now? I closed the laptop. This time, I decide the terms. That afternoon, I accepted the position. With one condition. No work after 6 unless lives or laws were genuinely at risk. The CEO laughed. You negotiate like a man with nothing left to prove. I don't. He extended his hand. Good. Those are exactly the people we need. Meanwhile, the Bennett estate became a battlefield. Not over money. Over truth. Liam moved out of the family mansion. Eleanor filed for divorce. Former executives accepted plea agreements. Newspapers continued uncovering old secrets. Richard's photograph disappeared from the company lobby, then from the website, then from annual reports. History quietly erased him, but consequences remembered. One evening, my phone rang. Amelia. For a long moment, I simply watched the screen, then answered. Hello. Hi. Her voice sounded steadier than before. I hope I'm not interrupting. You're not. She hesitated. I wanted to tell you something. I waited. I sold the apartment. The apartment. Our apartment. The place where memories had lived longer than people. How do you feel? Lighter. She laughed softly. I thought leaving would feel like betrayal. And it felt like breathing. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she added, I donated the memory box. I understood immediately. Ethan's belongings. The museum? No. She smiled faintly. To Ethan. He said memories belong with people who are still alive. I looked out the window. Snow had begun falling over the city. Small flakes. Quiet. Almost invisible. I'm glad. So am I. She paused. I don't think we should call each other anymore. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I think you're right. No anger. No. No friendship. Not yet. She accepted the answer. Take care of yourself, Asher. You too, Amelia. The call ended. Not dramatically. Not painfully. Simply. Finished. That was enough. A week before Christmas, Daniel invited me to a small gathering. No reporters. No lawyers. No envelopes. I laughed. That last promise is the most convincing. He grinned. You'll see. The gathering took place in a modest seaside house. Nothing luxurious. Just warmth. Bookshelves. Old photographs. The smell of fresh soup drifting from the kitchen. For the first time, I met Ethan without cemeteries, investigations, or unfinished questions surrounding us. He opened the door himself. You're late. I brought dessert. Then you're forgiven. We both laughed. The awkwardness lasted less than 30 seconds. That surprised me. Perhaps because we'd already met through years of letters. Or perhaps because resentment had never existed between us. Dinner lasted 4 hours. Not because anyone forced conversation. Because nobody wanted it to end. Daniel cooked. Poorly. Ethan insisted he had improved. Daniel insisted Ethan's standards had dropped. I found myself laughing harder than I had in years. Real laughter. The kind that arrives without permission. After dinner, we carried our tea onto the back porch. The sea stretched endlessly beneath a sky filled with stars. Ethan leaned against the railing. I used to dream about revenge. I looked toward him. For a long time, I imagined exposing everyone. Making speeches. Watching them suffer. He smiled faintly. Then one morning, I realized something. What? I had already lost 15 years. He looked out over the dark water. I refused to lose 16. The word stayed with me. I understand. He glanced sideways. I thought you would. We stood quietly. The ocean answered with gentle waves. A few weeks later, the court delivered its verdict. Richard Bennett received a lengthy prison sentence for fraud, conspiracy, insurance deception, and multiple financial crimes. Several former executives were convicted alongside him. The courtroom wasn't filled with applause. Justice rarely sounds dramatic. The judge simply finished reading the sentence. A gavel struck once. Life moved forward. Richard looked toward his family before being escorted away. Eleanor didn't meet his eyes. Liam stared ahead. Amelia quietly left through another door. No one celebrated. No one mourned. Consequences had finally reached their destination. Spring arrived earlier than expected. My new department slowly grew. Young employees joined because they believed honesty could exist inside business. I believed it too. Not because corruption had disappeared, because people willing to confront it still existed. One afternoon, Mia knocked on my office door. She carried a stack of applications. We've received more volunteers than positions. Really? She nodded enthusiastically. They said they read about what happened. I smiled. Then let's make sure they never have to experience it. Later that evening, I walked along the river. Families filled the park. Children chased pigeons. Street musicians played old songs. Ordinary life. The kind I once overlooked while chasing impossible expectations. My phone vibrated. A message from Ethan. Fishing this Saturday? I smiled. Only if you promise not to lecture me again. His reply came almost instantly. No promises. I laughed quietly. Years ago, I believed strength meant enduring everything in silence. Now I understood something different. Strength also meant choosing who deserved to walk beside you. Not because they completed your life. Because they respected it. I stopped near the riverbank. The current flowed steadily toward the sea. Never rushing. Never turning back. Only moving forward. For a long while, I simply watched the water. Then I turned and walked home. The invitation arrived without ceremony. A plain white envelope rested on my desk when I returned from a meeting. No company logo. No elegant handwriting. Just my name. Inside was a single card. Final hearing, State versus Richard Bennett. Witnesses requested. I read it twice before setting it down. The trial itself had ended months ago. This hearing was different. Victim impact. Final statements. Asset recovery. The last chapter before the case officially closed. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Microphones appeared the moment Daniel and I stepped from the car. Mr. Carter, do you forgive Amelia Bennett? Do you hate Richard Bennett? Did Ethan Brooks deserve justice? I kept walking. Daniel smiled faintly. They always ask the wrong questions. What should they ask? He adjusted his coat against the cold wind. They should ask how many people looked away while everything happened. Neither of us stopped. Inside the courthouse, silence replaced noise. Wooden benches, high ceilings, muted conversations. A place where words finally carried consequences. Richard Bennett looked older than I remembered. Not because prison had changed him overnight. Because control had left him. His expensive suits were gone. So was the confidence that once filled every room before he entered. He noticed me immediately. Our eyes met across the courtroom. He gave a bitter smile. You won. His voice barely carried. I answered just as quietly. No, you lost. There was an important difference. His smile disappeared. For several seconds, he simply stared at the floor. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The proceedings began. Financial reports. Recovered assets. Victim compensation. One witness after another spoke. Former employees. Investigators. Auditors. None raised their voices. Facts rarely need volume. Then Amelia was called. She walked to the witness stand wearing a simple navy coat. No jewelry. No makeup beyond what was necessary. She looked like someone who had spent months rebuilding herself one honest decision at a time. She raised her hand, took the oath, then sat. The prosecutor asked gently, Miss Bennett. She interrupted. My name is Amelia Brooks. A murmur spread through the courtroom. The prosecutor looked confused. You've changed your surname? She nodded. I legally removed Bennett. She paused. I didn't take anyone else's name. I returned to the one that reminded me who I wanted to become. No one misunderstood her meaning. She wasn't reclaiming a relationship. She was rejecting a legacy. The prosecutor continued. Did your father ever tell you the truth about Ethan Brooks? No. When did you discover it? The day I was supposed to marry another good man. Her eyes briefly found mine. No lingering emotion. Just gratitude. Then she looked forward again. I spent years believing grief excused everything. It doesn't. It explains. But it never excuses. The courtroom remained completely silent. She continued. I hurt someone who never deserved it. I can't undo that. But I can spend the rest of my life refusing to repeat it. No dramatic tears. No performance. Only accountability. Sometimes that is the rarest apology. When she stepped down, Liam quietly embraced her. No words. None were needed. Family, perhaps for the first time, had become something chosen instead of inherited. The hearing ended shortly before sunset. Richard Bennett received additional financial penalties. Most of his remaining assets were ordered liquidated to compensate those harmed by years of fraud and deception. He asked to speak before being escorted away. The judge allowed it. Richard slowly stood. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. I spent my life believing success justified every sacrifice. He looked toward Eleanor, then Liam, then Amelia. I kept telling myself I'd fix everything later. His gaze finally settled on me. I thought if enough time passed, people would stop asking questions. He laughed once. Without humor. I was wrong. No one answered. Some apologies arrived too late. Not because forgiveness is impossible. Because consequences have already become permanent. 2 officers approached him. As they led him away, he didn't look back. Not once. The courtroom doors closed behind him with a quiet click. It sounded less like an ending than a lock finally turning. Outside, the air felt lighter. The reporters had mostly gone. Only a handful remained, searching for one final headline. Instead, they watched something ordinary. Daniel shook my hand. Well, that's that. I smiled. I think it is. Ethan walked down the courthouse steps toward us. He had attended quietly from the back row, never asking for attention. For years he had been remembered as a ghost. Now he preferred living as a man. You two coming? He asked. Coming where? I asked. He grinned. The fishing trip you've postponed 3 times. Daniel laughed. He has a point. I looked toward the city skyline. Deadlines could wait. Emails could wait. Life didn't always have to. I'll drive. Good, Ethan said. You still owe me a rematch. I don't remember losing. That's because you're competitive. I prefer the word persistent. Daniel rolled his eyes. See. The 3 of us laughed as we walked toward the parking lot. No cameras followed. No speeches were made. Some of life's most meaningful victories happen without witnesses. 1 year later. The river looked exactly the same. Morning mist drifted across the water while fishermen prepared their lines along the bank. I stood on the small wooden dock with a cup of coffee warming my hands. Behind me, Ethan argued with Daniel over bait. They had been having the same argument for months. Neither had ever won. Some things were comforting because they never changed. My phone vibrated. A news notification appeared. Former Bennett headquarters officially reopens under new ownership. I smiled. Not because the past had disappeared, because the future no longer belonged to it. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The first rays of sunlight broke across the river. Golden. Quiet. Certain. Ethan handed me a fishing rod. You planning to stand there all day? Maybe. You'll never catch anything. I already did. He frowned. What? I looked at the calm water stretching into the distance. My life. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel laughed. That's the most philosophical thing you've ever said. It sounded better in my head. It still wasn't bad, Ethan admitted. We cast our lines into the river together. No ghosts. No unfinished promises. No borrowed anniversaries. Only 3 ordinary men enjoying an ordinary morning. Years ago, I thought walking away meant losing everything. I understand now that walking away from a lie is often the first honest step toward the life waiting beyond it. The river continued forward without looking back. So did I.